The ship carrying Ambassador Sarah Chen dropped out of hyperspace above the planet Korthax Prime, and she pressed her face against the viewing window like a child seeing snow for the first time. Below her, two massive fleets hung in space, their weapons pointed at each other across a gap of only a few thousand kilometers. The Velthari ships were smooth and silver, shaped like teardrops. The Krethani vessels were dark and angular, covered in spikes and armor plating. Both species had been fighting for 300 years, and both were ready to end it with one final battle that would destroy them both. Sarah was 34 years old. She had brown hair that she kept in a simple braid, and she wore a plain gray suit that she hoped would not offend either species. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 20 years ago, and they were still considered children by the older races of the galaxy. When the Galactic Council had asked for a neutral party to attempt peace negotiations, every advanced species had refused. The risk was too great. The hatred between the Velthari and Krethani was too deep. Anyone who tried to make peace would probably be killed by one side or the other. So they had asked the humans. The human government had debated for 3 days before agreeing. They chose Sarah because she had worked as a hostage negotiator before joining the diplomatic corps, and because she had once talked a man out of blowing up a building full of children. She was good at finding common ground. She was patient, and she was stubborn in a way that her teachers had always called a problem but her colleagues called a gift. Her assistant, a young man named Marcus Webb, came to stand beside her at the window. He was 25, fresh out of the diplomatic academy, and his hands were shaking slightly as he looked at the fleets below. "There are over 10,000 ships down there," he said. "Each fleet could destroy a planet if they start fighting while we're here." "Then we better make sure they don't start fighting," Sarah said. She turned away from the window and picked up her datapad. "What do we know about them?" Marcus had spent the entire journey reading everything humanity had collected about both species. "The Velthari are telepathic," he said. "They share thoughts with each other constantly. They consider privacy to be a form of dishonesty. They think the Krethani are deceivers because they keep their thoughts hidden." "And the Krethani?" "They're empaths. They can feel emotions but not read thoughts. They consider the Velthari to be invaders because they force their thoughts into other minds without permission. The war started when a Velthari delegation accidentally shared thoughts with a Krethani ambassador. The ambassador felt violated and attacked them. It escalated from there." Sarah nodded slowly. "So we have two species who can both sense things that humans can't sense. The Velthari think secrets are evil. The Krethani think forced mental contact is evil, and they've been killing each other for 3 centuries because of a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding that has cost billions of lives," Marcus said. "Both sides have lost entire worlds. They've forgotten what they were fighting about. Now they just fight because they hate each other." "No one fights for 300 years just because of hate," Sarah said. "There's always something else. Fear, maybe. Or pride. We need to find out what's really keeping them at war." The ship's captain announced that they were approaching the neutral station where the negotiations would take place. It was a small structure, built by the Galactic Council specifically for this purpose. It hung in the exact center of the gap between the two fleets, surrounded by a shield that would stop weapons fire but allow ships to dock. Sarah watched as their small vessel approached the station. She could see 2 other ships already docked there, one silver teardrop and one dark spike. The delegations had arrived. "Marcus," she said, "I need you to do something for me." "Anything, Ambassador?" "I need you to trust me. What I'm going to do in these negotiations might seem strange. It might seem foolish. But I need you to support me no matter what happens." Marcus looked at her with wide eyes. "What are you planning?" Sarah smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I don't know yet. That's the problem with negotiations. You can't plan everything in advance. You have to adapt. You have to be willing to try things that no one has tried before." She paused. The reason every other species refused this job is because they all thought they knew how it would end. They thought it was impossible, but humans don't think like that. We're too young to know what's impossible. The ship docked with a gentle bump. Sarah gathered her things and walked to the airlock. She took a deep breath, thinking about all the people who would die if she failed. Both fleets were armed with weapons that could crack planets. If the negotiations failed, they would fire those weapons at each other. The battle would spread. Other species would be drawn in. The war could consume the entire sector of the galaxy. No pressure, she thought to herself. The airlock opened, and she stepped onto the station. The inside was sparse and functional. White walls, gray floors, bright lights that had no visible source. A Galactic Council representative was waiting for her, a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms that it kept folded against its chest. "Ambassador Chen," the creature said, "I am Coordinator Zelax. I will be observing the negotiations. I must warn you that both delegations have already expressed extreme skepticism about your species' ability to mediate this dispute. The Velthari consider humans to be mentally primitive because you cannot share thoughts. The Krethani consider humans to be emotionally stunted because your empathic projections are so weak they can barely sense them." "So both sides think we're inferior," Sarah said. "That's actually helpful." Zelax's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. "Helpful how?" "Because neither side will see us as a threat. They'll underestimate us. That gives us room to work." "I do not understand human logic," Zelax said, "but I wish you success. The conference room is through that door. Both delegations are already waiting." Sarah thanked the coordinator and walked toward the door. Marcus followed close behind her, clutching his datapad like a shield. She could feel his nervousness, and she wondered if the Krethani could feel it too. The door slid open, and she got her first look at the beings she was supposed to reconcile. The Velthari were beautiful in an alien way. They had smooth, gray skin and large dark eyes that seemed to absorb light. Their bodies were slender and graceful, and they moved with a fluid coordination that suggested they were always aware of each other's positions. There were 5 of them, and they sat on one side of a long table watching Sarah with expressions she could not read. The Krethani were larger and rougher. They had thick, scaled skin in shades of red and brown, and their faces were dominated by wide mouths full of sharp teeth. Their eyes were small but bright, and they seemed to flicker with inner light as they looked at her. There were 5 of them as well, sitting on the opposite side of the table. The 2 groups did not look at each other. The hatred between them was so strong that Sarah felt she could almost touch it. "Good morning," she said, walking to the head of the table where a single chair waited for her. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm here to help you end this war." The leader of the Velthari delegation, a female named Thessara, spoke first. Her voice was melodic but cold. "You are human. Your mind is closed to us. We cannot know if you speak truth or lies." The leader of the Krethani, a male named Gorthak, let out a low growl. "Your emotions are faint and confusing. We cannot trust one whose heart we cannot read." Sarah had expected this. She sat down and placed her hands flat on the table where everyone could see them. "You're right," she said. "You can't read my mind or feel my emotions the way you can with each other, but maybe that's why I'm the right person for this job." "Explain," Thessara said. "You've been fighting for 300 years. In that time, how many peace negotiations have there been?" Gorthak snorted. "Dozens, all failures." "And who mediated those negotiations?" Thessara's large eyes narrowed. "Various species, telepaths, empaths, neutrals, all failed because they could not bridge the gap between our kinds." "But they were all species you could read in some way, weren't they?" Sarah leaned forward. "The telepaths could share thoughts with the Velthari. The empaths could feel emotions with the Krethani, and both sides spent the entire negotiation trying to read the mediator instead of listening to each other." There was a moment of silence. Sarah saw something flicker in Thessara's eyes, surprise, maybe, or recognition. You cannot be read, Thesara said slowly. You are a blank space. I'm a mirror, Sarah said. I can only reflect what you show me with your words and actions. If you want me to understand you, you'll have to explain yourselves. And if you want to understand each other, you'll have to listen. Gorthak's growl had changed tone. It was softer now, almost thoughtful. This is different. Different is what we need, Sarah said. You've been doing the same thing for 300 years and it hasn't worked. I'm offering you something new. I'm offering you a chance to be heard, really heard, by someone who has no choice but to pay attention to your words. She looked from one side of the table to the other, meeting every pair of eyes, the large dark ones of the Velthari, the small bright ones of the Crethani. So, she said, who wants to go first? The room was silent. The two delegations stared at her, and she could feel the weight of 300 years of war pressing down on her shoulders. But she kept her face calm and her hands steady on the table. This was going to be the hardest thing she had ever done. But she was human, and humans did not know when to give up. The negotiations had begun. The first day was a disaster. Sarah had expected it to be difficult, but she had not expected the sheer depth of the hatred between the two species. Every time one delegation spoke, the other would interrupt with accusations. Every historical fact was disputed. Every grievance was answered with a counter-grievance. Thesara spoke of the Crethani massacre at Velter 7, where her species had lost 2 billion people. Gorthak responded by describing the Velthari mindrape of Crethani prisoners, who had been driven insane by forced telepathic contact. Thesara accused the Crethani of starting the war with unprovoked violence. Gorthak accused the Velthari of invading Crethani mines without permission, which was the same as assault. Sarah listened to all of it. She did not take sides. She did not judge. She just listened and took notes and asked questions when she did not understand something. By the end of the first day, she had filled her datapad with 300 years of atrocities. Both sides had done terrible things. Both sides had suffered terrible losses, and both sides believed with absolute certainty that they were the victims and the other side was the aggressor. We will resume tomorrow, Sarah said when the lights in the station dimmed to signal the end of the day. Thank you both for your time. Thesara rose from her seat and looked at Sarah with those large, dark eyes. You have heard our grievances. You know what they have done to us. How can you remain neutral? Because being neutral is the only way I can help you, Sarah said. If I take sides, I become part of the war, and you already have enough people fighting. What you need is someone who can help you find peace. There is no peace with them, Gorthak growled. They violate minds. They destroy the sanctity of thought. They are monsters. And you are murderers, Thesara said, her voice like ice. You slaughter without mercy. You destroy without thought. You are beasts. Sarah stepped between them, even though both aliens towered over her small human body. Stop, she said. I know you hate each other. I've been listening to your hate all day. But if you want this war to end, you need to find something other than hate. What else is there? Gorthak asked. We have been fighting so long that fighting is all we know. Sarah looked up at him. His bright eyes were fierce, but she could see something behind the anger, something tired, something sad. I don't know yet, she said honestly, but I'm going to find it, I promise you that. She turned and walked out of the conference room, Marcus following close behind. When the door closed behind them, she let out a long breath and leaned against the wall. That was intense, Marcus said. His face was pale. I didn't know it would be like that. Neither did I, Sarah admitted. I've dealt with hostage situations before. I've talked to killers and terrorists and people who wanted to burn the world down, but I've never felt hatred like that. It's like poison in the air. Do you think we can actually do this? Do you think peace is possible? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she straightened up and looked at her young assistant with tired but determined eyes. I don't know if it's possible, she said, but I know it's necessary. And I know that someone has to try." She paused. "Get some sleep, Marcus. Tomorrow is going to be harder." She walked to her quarters and lay down on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere out there, beyond the walls of the station, 2 fleets waited with weapons armed. 10,000 ships, millions of soldiers, all ready to die for a war that no one could win. And she had 1 week to stop it. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind was racing. She kept thinking about what Gorthak had said. Fighting is all we know. 300 years of war. Entire generations had been born and died knowing nothing but conflict. The hatred was not just political or historical, it was cultural. It was woven into the very identity of both species. How do you make peace when war is who you are? She did not have an answer, but she knew she had to find one. Tomorrow, she would try something different. The second day began with Sarah arriving at the conference room before either delegation. She had rearranged the furniture during the night, moving the long table to the side and replacing it with a circle of chairs. When the Velthari and Crethani arrived, they stopped in the doorway and stared. "What is this?" Thessara asked. "A different way of talking," Sarah said. "Yesterday, you sat on opposite sides of a table like enemies in battle. Today, I want us to sit in a circle like equals in conversation." "We are not equals," Gorthak growled. "We are enemies." "You're also both people," Sarah said. "You both have families. You both have things you love. You both have fears and hopes and dreams. Today, I don't want to hear about the war. I want to hear about you." The delegations exchanged confused glances. This was clearly not what they had expected. "What purpose does this serve?" Thessara asked. "We are here to negotiate an end to the war, not to share personal stories." "The war has been going on for 300 years, Sarah said. "We have time for 1 day of personal stories." She gestured to the chairs. "Please, sit down. I promise this will help." Slowly, reluctantly, both delegations took their seats. The circle forced them to sit closer together than they had at the table. Sarah could see how uncomfortable they were. The Velthari held themselves stiffly, and the Crethani kept their hands near their weapons. Sarah sat down in her own chair and looked around the circle. "I'll go first," she said. "My name is Sarah Chen. I was born on a planet called Earth in a country called Canada. When I was a child, my parents used to take me camping in the mountains. We would sit around a fire at night and look at the stars. That's when I first started dreaming about space." She paused, watching the aliens' faces. They were listening, even if they did not understand why she was telling them this. "I became a hostage negotiator because I wanted to save lives. I talked to people who were hurting and scared and angry, and I helped them find a way out of their pain. That's what I want to do here. I want to help you find a way out of this war." She looked at Thessara. "Will you tell us something about yourself? Not about the war, about you." Thessara was silent for a long moment. Then slowly she began to speak. "My name is Thessara. I am the 3rd daughter of the 4th house of Velter. When I was young, before the war came to my world, I used to swim in the oceans of my homeworld. The water was warm and full of light. I could feel the minds of the sea creatures all around me, gentle and simple in content." She paused, and something flickered in her dark eyes, pain perhaps, or longing. "The oceans are gone now. The Crethani burned them away." Sarah nodded, acknowledging the pain without judging it. Then she looked at Gorthak. "And you?" Gorthak's scales rippled, a sign of discomfort Sarah had learned. But after a moment he spoke. "I am Gorthak, war leader of the 7th Fleet. My people are warriors. We have always been warriors, but before the war we were also builders. My father built ships, not warships, but exploration vessels. He dreamed of traveling to the edge of the galaxy. He dreamed of finding new worlds for our people." His bright eyes dimmed. "He died in the first battle of the war. His ship was destroyed by Velthari weapons." Sarah saw how both sides reacted to each other's stories. The pain was real. The loss was real. And for the first time, they were seeing each other not as monsters but as beings who had suffered. This was what she had been looking for. This was the crack in the wall of hatred. She had 1 week to make it bigger. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern. Each morning, Sarah would gather both delegations in the circle of chairs and ask them to share something about themselves. She learned that Thesara had a daughter who was fighting on the front lines. She learned that Gorthak had lost his mate in a Velthari attack. She learned that both sides had artists and musicians and poets, people who created beauty even in the midst of war. She also learned about the fear. The Velthari were afraid of being alone. Their telepathic bond was the foundation of their society. To be cut off from other minds was, to them, a kind of living death. They feared the Krethani because the Krethani could block telepathic contact. To be near a Krethani was to be surrounded by silence. The Krethani were afraid of being invaded. Their empathic abilities made them vulnerable to emotional manipulation. They feared the Velthari because the Velthari could project thoughts directly into their minds. To be near a Velthari was to feel foreign thoughts pushing at the edges of their consciousness. Both species feared the same thing, loss of self. The Velthari feared losing their connection to others. The Krethani feared losing their autonomy, and the war had made both fears worse. On the 5th day, Sarah took a risk. "I want to try something," she said. "It might be uncomfortable, it might not work, but I think it's important." Both delegations looked at her warily. They had grown to trust her over the past few days, but they still did not trust each other. "What do you want to try?" Thesara asked. Sarah took a deep breath. "I want you to show each other your fear." The room went cold. Gorthak's scales bristled with alarm. Thesara's eyes went wide with something that looked like panic. "Impossible," Gorthak said. "To show them our fear would be to show them our weakness. They would use it against us." "To share our fear with them would be to touch their minds," Thesara said. "They would feel violated. It would start the war again." "I'm not asking you to do it the way you've done it before," Sarah said. "I'm asking you to do it differently. Thesara, I want you to describe your fear in words out loud without using telepathy. Gorthak, I want you to listen without blocking. I want you to feel her fear with your empathy, and then I want you to do the same for her." Both leaders stared at her. The other members of both delegations looked at each other with expressions of disbelief. "This has never been done," Thesara said. "Then it's time to do it for the first time," Sarah said. "The war started because of a misunderstanding about mental contact. Maybe it can end with a new kind of understanding." There was a long silence. Sarah could see the struggle in both leaders' faces, the fear warring with the hope, the hatred warring with the exhaustion of 300 years of fighting. Finally Thesara spoke, "I will try." Gorthak let out a low growl. "If this is a trick." "It's not a trick," Sarah said. "It's a chance. The first real chance you've had in 3 centuries. Slowly Gorthak nodded. "Very well, I will. Listen." Sarah watched as Thesara closed her eyes and began to speak. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I am afraid of the silence," she said. "When I am near your kind, I cannot feel the minds of my people. I am alone in a way that no Velthari should ever be alone. It is like being blind and deaf and numb all at once. It is like being dead while still breathing." Sarah looked at Gorthak. His bright eyes had gone dim and his scales were flat against his skin. He was feeling it, not the thoughts but the emotions behind them, the terror, the loneliness, the desperate need for connection. "I did not know," he said softly. "I did not know it felt like that." "Now you," Sarah said to Gorthak, "tell her your fear." Gorthak's clawed hands gripped the arms of his chair. For a moment, Sarah thought he would refuse. Then he spoke. "I am afraid of losing myself," he said. "When your kind project thoughts, I feel them pushing against my mind. It is like drowning, like being swallowed by something vast and hungry. I cannot tell where I end and you begin. It is like dying while still alive." Thesara's eyes were open now, and they were wet with something that looked like tears. "I did not know," she said. I thought you rejected us because you hated us. I did not know you were afraid." "We have always been afraid," Gorthak said. "We have always been afraid of you. That is why we fight." "And we have always been afraid of you," Thesara said. "That is why we attack before you can block us out." Sarah leaned forward. This was the moment. This was the crack in the wall, and she had to make it wider. "You've both been afraid," she said. "And you've both been fighting because of that fear. But now you know something you didn't know before. You know that the other side is just as scared as you are." She looked around the circle at all 10 aliens, 5 Velthari, 5 Krethani, all staring at her with expressions of shock and confusion, and something that might have been hope. "Fear is not a weapon," she said. "It's a bridge. You both feel it. You both understand it. And maybe, if you can accept each other's fear, you can find a way to stop fighting." The room was silent. Sarah waited, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, Thesara spoke. "What would you have us do?" Sarah smiled. It was a small smile, tired but genuine. "I have an idea," she said, "but you're probably going to think I'm crazy." The 6th day began with Sarah presenting her proposal. It was, as she had warned, completely insane by the standards of both species. It was unprecedented. It was potentially dangerous. And it was, she believed, the only way to end the war. "I want to create a new kind of communication," she said. "Something that is neither telepathy nor empathy. Something that both of you can participate in without violating each other's boundaries." "What kind of communication?" Thesara asked. "Human communication," Sarah said. "Words spoken out loud, written on paper, expressed through art and music and stories." Gorthak let out a skeptical grunt. "Your methods are primitive." "They're also neutral," Sarah said. "When I speak to you, I'm not pushing thoughts into your mind or projecting emotions at you. I'm offering you information and letting you choose whether to accept it. That's what makes words different from telepathy or empathy. They're a gift, not an invasion." She pulled out her datapad and showed them something she had been working on all night. It was a document, a treaty, but not like any treaty that had ever been written before. "This is a proposal for what I'm calling the Protocol of Understanding," she said. "It creates rules for communication between your species. Velthari telepaths will learn to convert their thoughts into words before sharing them. Krethani empaths will learn to express emotions through language instead of direct projection, and both sides will agree to respect the boundaries of the other." Thesara studied the document with her dark eyes. "This would require us to change how we think, how we communicate with each other and with the universe." "Yes," Sarah said, "it would require change, but isn't that better than extinction?" Gorthak took the datapad and read through the proposal, his scaled brow furrowed with concentration. "This could work," he said slowly, "if both sides followed the rules, if both sides truly wanted peace." "Do you want peace?" Sarah asked him directly. Gorthak was silent for a long moment. Then he looked up at her and she saw something in his bright eyes that she had not seen before. Weariness, longing, hope. "I am tired of war," he said. "I have been tired of war for longer than you have been alive, human. I have watched my people die for generations. I have sent young soldiers to their deaths because it was my duty. I have honored them and mourned them and replaced them with more young soldiers." He paused. "If there is truly a path to peace, I will walk it, even if it means changing who we are." Thesara was still looking at the document. Her slender fingers traced the words on the screen. "My people believe that words are lies," she said. "We trust only thoughts, shared directly from mind to mind. To embrace words is to embrace a form of communication that we have always considered inferior." "Not inferior," Sarah said. "Different. Words require more effort. They require you to think carefully about what you want to say and how you want to say it. They give you time to consider, to revise, to choose. That's not a weakness. That's a strength." And if we make this change, Thessara said, if we learn to speak instead of think, if we learn to listen instead of feel, will the war truly end? Sarah could not lie to her. I don't know, she said. Peace is not something I can give you. It's something you have to build together. All I can do is give you the tools. The room was silent. Both delegations looked at their leaders, waiting for a decision that would shape the future of two species. Then Thessara did something that no Velthari had done in 300 years of conflict. She stood up, walked across the circle, and extended her hand to Gorthak. I am afraid of you, she said, speaking the words out loud instead of projecting them telepathically. But I am more afraid of what will happen if we keep fighting. I am willing to try. Gorthak stared at her hand. His scales rippled with emotion, fear and surprise and something else, something that might have been respect. Slowly, he reached out his own clawed hand and took hers. I am afraid of you as well, he said, but I am also tired of fear. I am willing to try. Sarah watched them standing there, two ancient enemies holding hands like children learning to trust. It was not a perfect peace. It was not even the beginning of a peace. It was just two people deciding to try something different. But it was enough. It was a start. The seventh day was the hardest. Sarah had drafted the final version of the Protocol of Understanding, incorporating input from both delegations. It was a complex document, full of rules and procedures and safeguards, but at its heart was a simple idea: communication without invasion, words instead of thoughts, choices instead of compulsions. The treaty also included practical measures for ending the war. A ceasefire would take effect immediately. Both fleets would withdraw to their own territories. Prisoners would be exchanged. A joint commission would be established to investigate war crimes on both sides, not to punish, but to document, to remember, to ensure that the horrors of the past would not be repeated. It was not a perfect treaty. Sarah knew that. There were issues that it did not address, grievances that it did not resolve, wounds that it could not heal, but it was a foundation, something to build on. The signing ceremony was scheduled for noon station time. Both delegations gathered in the conference room. The table had been restored to its original position, with the treaty document placed at the center. Coordinator Zelax was there to witness, his 4 arms folded solemnly against his chest. But when Sarah arrived, she found both delegations standing on opposite sides of the room, their expressions hard and angry. What happened? She asked. Thessara's voice was cold. We have learned that during the negotiations, Krethani forces attacked one of our supply convoys. 12 ships were destroyed. 3,000 of our people are dead. Sarah's heart sank. She turned to Gorthak. Is this true? Gorthak's scales were flat against his skin, a sign of shame she had learned. It is true. The attack was ordered by elements of our military who oppose the peace talks. They did not have my authorization. It does not matter who authorized it, Thessara said. Your people killed our people while we were negotiating peace. How can we trust you? How can we sign a treaty with murderers? And how many of our people have your forces killed during these negotiations? Gorthak demanded. We both know that attacks have continued on both sides. That is why we need this treaty, to stop the killing. The killing must stop before we sign, not after. Sarah stepped between them just as she had done on the first day. But this time, she did not try to calm them down. Instead, she spoke the truth. You're right, she said. Both of you are right. The killing should have stopped before now. The fact that it didn't is a failure, my failure as much as yours. I should have insisted on a ceasefire from the beginning. She paused. But we can't change the past. We can only change the future. And if you walk away from this treaty, the killing will continue. More convoys will be destroyed. More people will die. Not 3,000, but 3 million, 30 million, 3 billion. She looked at Thessara. I know you're angry. I know you're hurt. You have every right to be. But if you refuse to sign because of this attack, you're not honoring the dead. You're condemning the living. Then she looked at Gorthak. "And I know you're ashamed. I know this attack makes you look weak and untrustworthy, but if you use that shame as an excuse to give up, you're not being honorable. You're being a coward." Both leaders stared at her. No one had ever spoken to them like that. No one would dare. But Sarah was human, and humans did not know when to stop. "You've been fighting for 300 years, she said. "In that time, you've had 1,000 chances to make peace, and you've thrown away everyone. You've let anger and pride and fear stop you from doing what you know is right. And every time you've walked away from the negotiating table, more people have died." She picked up the treaty document and held it up so both delegations could see it. "This is not a perfect document. It won't solve all your problems. It won't bring back the dead or heal all the wounds. But it's a start. It's a promise that you're willing to try. And if you're too proud or too angry or too scared to make that promise, then everything we've done here has been for nothing." She set the document down on the table. "I've done everything I can. The rest is up to you." Then she turned and walked out of the room. Marcus was waiting for her in the corridor. His face was pale. "What are you doing? You can't just leave." "I'm not leaving," Sarah said. "I'm giving them space to make a decision. If I stay in there and keep talking, they'll just keep arguing with me. They need to argue with each other. They need to figure out if peace is worth the risk." "But what if they decide it's not? What if they walk away?" Sarah leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. She was exhausted. She had barely slept in 7 days. She had given everything she had to these negotiations, and now it was out of her hands. "Then we'll have failed," she said, "and the war will continue, and a lot of people will die." She opened her eyes and looked at Marcus. "But I don't think that's going to happen." "Why not?" Sarah smiled. It was a small, tired smile, but it was real. "Because they're tired too. They've been fighting for 300 years and they're exhausted. They want peace. They're just afraid to reach for it." "And you think they'll reach for it now?" "I think I gave them a push. Whether they fall forward or backward is up to them." They waited in the corridor for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Sarah could hear voices through the door, raised at first then quieter. She could not make out the words, but she could feel the tension, the fear, the desperate hope. Finally, the door opened. Coordinator Zelak stepped out, his 4 eyes wide with amazement. "Ambassador Chen," he said, "they are ready to sign." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of fear that she had been carrying for 7 days. She walked back into the conference room and saw Thessara and Gorthak standing on either side of the table, the treaty document between them. They had both signed it. "Ambassador," Thessara said, "we have agreed to your terms. The war will end. The protocol of understanding will be implemented. We will learn to speak with words instead of thoughts. And we will learn to listen with patience instead of fear," Gorthak added. "It will not be easy. There will be challenges, but we are committed to trying." Sarah looked at them both, the elegant Velthari with her dark eyes and the massive Krethani with his bright ones. They were still standing on opposite sides of the table. They were still afraid of each other, but they had signed the treaty. It was a start. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for trusting each other. Thank you for choosing peace." Thessara tilted her head. "You are a strange species, humans. You cannot read minds or feel emotions. You are weak and small and short-lived, but you have something that we lack." "What's that?" "Hope," Thessara said. "You hope for things that seem impossible. You believe that the future can be better than the past. We had forgotten how to do that. You reminded us." Gorthak nodded his massive head. "My people have a saying, the strongest warrior is the one who can put down his weapon. I never understood that saying until now. You taught us that there is strength in choosing not to fight." Sarah felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away and smiled. "I didn't teach you anything," she said. "I just helped you remember what you already knew. You both wanted peace. You just needed someone to show you it was possible. The signing ceremony was completed with the official seals of both governments. Coordinator Zelax transmitted the treaty to the Galactic Council, and within hours, the news had spread across the galaxy. The Velthari-Crethani War, which had lasted 300 years and cost billions of lives, was over. Sarah watched through the viewport as the two fleets began to withdraw. The silver teardrops and the dark spikes moved apart, weapons powering down, heading back to their own territories. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Marcus came to stand beside her. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it." "We did it," Sarah said. "I couldn't have done it alone." What happens now? Sarah thought about the long road ahead. The treaty was just the beginning. There would be years of work to implement the protocol of understanding. There would be setbacks and challenges and moments when it seemed like everything was falling apart. But the foundation had been laid. The wall of hatred had been cracked. "Now we build," she said. "We build understanding and trust and cooperation. We build a future where these two species can live side by side without fear. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But it's possible," she smiled. "Humans are good at building things." Marcus looked out at the departing fleets. "Do you think the galaxy will remember this? Do you think they'll remember what humans did here?" Sarah shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that the killing has stopped. What matters is that children will grow up on both sides who have never known war. What matters is that we tried something crazy and impossible, and it worked." She turned away from the viewport and started walking toward the docking bay where their ship was waiting. "Come on," she said, "let's go home." The story of Ambassador Sarah Chen spread across the galaxy in the weeks and months that followed. The other species of the Galactic Council, who had dismissed humans as primitive and insignificant, began to look at them with new eyes. Here was a species that had accomplished what no one else could. Here was a species that had ended a 300-year war with nothing but words and patience and stubbornness. The protocol of understanding became a model for other conflicts. When tensions arose between species, they would call for human mediators, not because humans were the smartest or the strongest, but because they were the most creative. Humans did not think in straight lines. They did not accept impossible as an answer. They found ways around problems that other species could not even see. Sarah Chen returned to Earth and was hailed as a hero. She was offered medals and honors and positions of power. She turned them all down. She did not want glory. She just wanted to keep helping. She spent the rest of her life training other human diplomats, teaching them the lessons she had learned on Korthax Prime. She taught them to listen more than they spoke. She taught them to look for the fear behind the anger, the hope behind the despair. She taught them that every conflict, no matter how ancient or bitter, could be resolved if both sides were willing to try. She died at the age of 92, surrounded by her family and friends. Her last words were reported to be, "Keep trying, never give up, peace is always possible." The Velthari and Crethani sent representatives to her funeral, the first time members of both species had stood together on Earth. They spoke of her with reverence and gratitude. They said she had given them something more valuable than territory or resources or power. She had given them hope. And in the centuries that followed, as humanity spread across the galaxy and took its place among the stars, the story of Sarah Chen became a legend. It was told to children on 100 worlds. It was taught in schools and universities and diplomatic academies. It became a symbol of what humans were capable of when they put aside their own differences and worked for the good of all. The legend went like this. Once there was a great war between two ancient species. They had fought for 300 years and they were about to destroy each other. No one could stop them. No one could make peace. The galaxy had given up hope. Then a small, weak, short-lived human came to them. She could not read minds. She could not feel emotions. She had none of the powers that the other species possessed. All she had were words and patience and a stubborn refusal to accept that peace was impossible. And with nothing but those simple tools, she ended the war. The moral of the story was simple: never underestimate a human. They may be small and weak and primitive, but they have something that no other species in the galaxy possesses. They have the ability to hope for the impossible and the determination to make it real. That is why, across the galaxy, in 1,000 languages, there is a phrase that all species know. It is spoken with respect and wonder and a little bit of fear. It is spoken when someone accomplishes something that should not be possible, when someone refuses to give up even when all hope seems lost. The phrase is simply this: humanity, fuck yeah.